The fluorescent lights of the hospital cafeteria buzzed overhead as Marcus Richardson stood in line, his hands trembling slightly as he gripped his wallet. He'd been awake for 36 hours straight, watching his 8-year-old daughter Emma fight for every breath in the ICU upstairs. The pneumonia had come on so fast, so viciously, that he hadn't even had time to process what was happening before the ambulance was rushing them through the night. Now standing in this sterile space that smelled of disinfectant and reheated pizza, he realized he'd eaten nothing but vending machine crackers in 2 days. His body was starting to shut down, but his mind wouldn't stop racing. What if she didn't make it? What if he lost her the same way he'd lost Rebecca 3 years ago? He ordered coffee and a sandwich he knew he wouldn't be able to finish, then turned to find a seat in the nearly empty cafeteria. That's when he saw him, a man in an expensive tailored suit, sitting alone at a corner table, typing furiously on his laptop. Something about the man seemed familiar, though Marcus couldn't quite place why. But it wasn't his face that caught Marcus's attention and held it. It was what gleamed on the table beside the laptop. A delicate silver bracelet with 3 small charms, a star, a heart, and a tiny bird in flight. Marcus's sandwich slipped from his hand, clattering onto the tray. He knew that bracelet. He'd seen it every single day for 5 years of marriage. He'd held Rebecca's wrist as she wore it on their wedding day, on the day Emma was born, on the last morning she'd kissed him goodbye before the accident that took her life. His breath caught in his throat as memories crashed over him like waves. That bracelet had disappeared from Rebecca's belongings after the accident. The hospital had told him that sometimes personal items went missing in the chaos of emergency situations, and he'd been too shattered by grief to pursue it further. But here it was, on this stranger's table, in a hospital cafeteria 3 states away from where Rebecca had died. Marcus's legs moved before his brain could stop them. He crossed the cafeteria, his exhaustion forgotten, replaced by a surge of adrenaline and confusion. The man looked up as Marcus's shadow fell across his table, his expression shifting from annoyance at the interruption to concern as he took in Marcus's haggard appearance. "I'm sorry to bother you," Marcus said, his voice cracking. "But that bracelet, where did you get that bracelet?" The man's eyes widened, and his hand instinctively moved to cover the piece of jewelry. For a moment, an unreadable expression crossed his face, something between guilt and profound sadness. Then he closed his laptop slowly and gestured to the chair across from him. "Please sit down," he said quietly. "I think we need to talk." Marcus sat, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. Up close, he realized why the man seemed familiar. This was James Chen, the CEO of Chen Medical Technologies, one of the largest medical equipment manufacturers in the country. Marcus had seen his face in business magazines and waiting rooms, always accompanied by stories of his company's innovations and philanthropy. "That bracelet belonged to my wife," Marcus said, fighting to keep his voice steady. "She died 3 years ago in a car accident. It went missing from her belongings at the hospital." "How do you have it?" James Chen's face seemed to age 10 years in an instant. He picked up the bracelet, holding it carefully in his palm, as if it were made of glass. "I've been carrying this with me for 3 years," he said softly. "Waiting for this moment, though I never really believed it would come." "What was your wife's name?" "Rebecca." "Rebecca Richardson." James nodded slowly, his eyes glistening. "The accident happened on Route 47, didn't it? On a Tuesday evening in October." Marcus's blood ran cold. "How do you know that?" "Because my daughter, Sophie, was in the other car." James's voice broke on the last word. He took a shaky breath before continuing. "She'd just gotten her license. She was 17 texting a friend, not paying attention. She ran the red light. Your wife's car took the full impact on the driver's side." The cafeteria seemed to spin around Marcus. All this time, he'd never known the details of the other driver. The police had told him it was a young driver, that there would be legal proceedings, but he'd been so consumed by grief and suddenly being a single father to Emma that he'd let his lawyer handle everything. He'd never wanted to know who was responsible. He'd thought it would only make the anger worse, and he needed to stay strong for his daughter. "Sophie survived with minor injuries," James continued, tears now flowing freely down his face. "But the guilt almost killed her anyway. She stopped eating, stopped sleeping. She tried to end her life twice in the first year. She's 20 now, and she's finally starting to heal. But not a day goes by that she doesn't carry what happened. Why do you have my wife's bracelet? Marcus asked again, his own tears starting to fall. James opened his laptop and turned it toward Marcus. On the screen was a hospital dashboard, patient records, equipment manifests, donation logs. After the accident, I was destroyed. My daughter was destroyed. I wanted to do something, anything, to make meaning out of what happened. I couldn't bring your wife back. But I learned something about her in those dark days after the accident. Do you know what your wife did for a living? Marcus nodded numbly. She was a nurse. Pediatric ICU. She was a county general, wasn't she? In one of the most underfunded hospitals in the state. James pulled up another screen. After the accident, I contacted the hospital. I asked about her. Her colleagues told me she used to buy supplies out of her own pocket. When the hospital budget ran short, she'd stay late without pay to comfort parents of sick children. She'd advocate fiercely for every kid who came through those doors, regardless of whether their families could afford treatment. James's hand shook as he opened another file. So I made a choice. I couldn't give you your wife back. I couldn't erase what my daughter did, but I could honor who your wife was. Over the past 3 years, Chen Medical Technologies has donated over $15 million in medical equipment to underfunded pediatric hospitals across the country. County General was first. We've supplied ventilators, monitors, diagnostic equipment, everything they needed. And we've done it in your wife's name, though we kept it anonymous at my request. I wasn't ready to face you. I didn't think I ever would be. Marcus stared at the screen, unable to process what he was hearing. James pulled up a map showing dozens of hospitals, each marked with donation amounts and dates. Thousands of children had been treated with equipment donated in Rebecca's memory. The bracelet, James said, his voice barely a whisper, was found at the scene. It had come off in the impact. The police gave it to me as part of the accident report. I should have returned it to you immediately. I know that, but I kept it. I carried it with me every single day as a reminder of the life Sophie took, of the woman whose kindness I was trying to honor, of the debt I could never truly repay. It's been my burden and my purpose. Marcus reached across the table with a trembling hand. James placed the bracelet in his palm, and Marcus closed his fist around it, feeling the familiar weight of it. The metal was warm from being in James's pocket, and Marcus could see that it had been polished carefully, lovingly maintained. Why are you here? Marcus asked. At this hospital? We're donating a new pediatric cardiac wing, James said. I personally oversee every pediatric donation we make. I need to see where Rebecca's legacy goes. I need to know it matters. Marcus thought of Emma, 3 floors up, breathing with the help of a ventilator, fighting for her life with equipment that might have been donated by this man, in memory of the mother she missed every single day. The coincidence was almost too much to bear. My daughter is upstairs, Marcus said quietly. In the pediatric ICU, pneumonia, she's 8 years old, and she's all I have left of Rebecca. James's face went white. Emma? Emma Richardson? You know her name? Every donation we make, I ask for updates on outcomes. I read reports. Your daughter was admitted 2 days ago. I saw her name on the patient list this morning. James stood up abruptly, then sat back down, overwhelmed. I've been sitting here trying to work, but I kept thinking about a little girl, upstairs with the same last name as the woman whose memory I've been trying to honor. I wondered if there was a connection, but I told myself the world couldn't possibly be that small. They sat in silence for a long moment. 2 fathers bound together by tragedy and coincidence, by loss and an unexpected thread of grace. Finally, Marcus spoke. I should hate you. I should hate your daughter. I spent the first year after Rebecca died being so angry I couldn't see straight. But sitting here now, hearing what you've done, thinking about all those children whose lives were saved by equipment. You donated in her name? He paused, wiping his eyes. Rebecca would have loved that. She would have said that's exactly what should come from tragedy. More life, more chances, more hope. I don't deserve your forgiveness, James said hoarsely. Maybe not, Marcus agreed. But Rebecca would have given it anyway. She had the biggest heart of anyone I've ever known. She became a pediatric nurse because she said children deserved fierce advocates, people who would fight for them when they couldn't fight for themselves. What you've done, you've made her that advocate for thousands of kids she Never got the chance to meet. James buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. When he finally looked up, his eyes were red but clearer than they'd been. How is Emma doing, really? The doctors say the next 24 hours are critical. She's on a ventilator and they're watching her closely. I've been so scared, Marcus's voice broke. I can't lose her too. She's everything. May I? James hesitated. May I do something? Not to buy forgiveness or assuage guilt, but because I want to help. Emma's care, any costs, any specialists she needs, anything at all. Please let me help. Marcus started to protest, then stopped. He thought about Rebecca, about how she never let pride stop her from accepting help if it meant a child got better care. He thought about Emma upstairs, and about the strange, painful, beautiful circle that had brought him face to face with the man whose daughter had changed his life forever. Okay, he said quietly, but not as payment, not as debt. If you do this, you do it because you're honoring my wife's belief that every child deserves the best possible care. You do it because that's who you've chosen to become after what happened. James nodded, pulling out his phone immediately. Within minutes, he'd called the hospital administrator and arranged for a consultation with the top pediatric pulmonologist in the region. He'd done it quietly, efficiently, with the kind of authority that came from years of making things happen. When he hung up, he looked at Marcus with an expression of such raw vulnerability that Marcus felt his remaining anger dissolve. Would you tell me about her? James asked. About Rebecca? Not about the accident. About who she was. Sophie's been so consumed by guilt that she's never been able to see your wife as a real person. Maybe if you'd be willing, someday she could meet you. Hear about the woman whose life she took. It might help her heal, or it might be too much to ask. I understand if... I'll think about it, Marcus interrupted gently. I'm not ready today. Maybe not tomorrow. But someday, yes, I think Rebecca would want that too. She always believed in second chances, especially for young people who made mistakes. They exchanged phone numbers, and James insisted on going upstairs with Marcus to check on Emma. As they rode the elevator together, Marcus looked down at the bracelet in his hand. The star for hope, the heart for love, the bird for freedom. Rebecca had told him once that she wore it to remind herself what she was fighting for every time she walked into a patient's room. Now, 3 years after her death, that bracelet had found its way back to him through the most impossible of circumstances, carried by a man who'd been trying to honor her memory in the only way he knew how. It wasn't justice. It wasn't redemption. But maybe it was something just as important, a reminder that even from the deepest tragedy, something beautiful could grow. When they reached the ICU, Emma was awake. She was still on the ventilator, but her eyes brightened when she saw her father. Marcus rushed to her side, holding up the bracelet so she could see it. Look what I found, sweetheart, he whispered. Mommy's bracelet. It found its way back to us. Emma's eyes filled with tears, and she reached out weakly to touch it. Marcus fastened it around her thin wrist, where it hung loose but secure. And as he did, he felt something shift in his chest, a weight he'd been carrying for 3 years beginning, finally, to lift. James stood in the doorway watching, and Marcus caught his eye and nodded. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. It meant that sometimes the path forward from grief didn't look like you expected. Sometimes it looked like forgiveness you didn't think you could give, connection in the most unlikely places, and the understanding that the people who hurt us are often hurting just as badly themselves. Emma squeezed her father's hand, her fingers curling around the bracelet. And Marcus knew that Rebecca was watching somehow, proud of the grace they'd all found in the darkest of places. The road ahead would still be hard, but they would walk it together now, two families connected by tragedy, choosing to honor a woman who'd believed in the power of kindness above all else. And in that hospital room, with the machines beeping and the bracelet gleaming in the fluorescent light, they all felt her love surrounding them, showing them the way forward. One small act of humanity at a time.